Katie Marshall. Thank you so
Alisha.
much. I'm so glad you're here today. It's an honor to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. I was thinking the last time we spoke, was it 3 or 4 years ago when we were both kind of starting, or at least in the more beginning stages?
Yeah, you were on the podcast probably about 2 years ago, 2.5
Yeah.
years ago. And in the first season
Yes.
of the podcast, and not only were you in the first season of the podcast, you came back and interviewed me.
Yes, I loved that one.
I loved them all.
I was just thinking about how different I don't know if it's wildly different, but it's different enough, like perspective on life and business and what I've done. Like in that time since we last spoke, I've gotten a master's degree, I've moved, I've changed clients and kept some. It's just a lot of life between podcasts.
Yeah, but good stuff. And we are going to dig into it today. And we're going to take this beautiful audience along for the ride with us.
Okay.
So I am just totally revved up to share what it is that you do.
Cool.
And in order to do that, I want to start with a story.
Got it.
Okay. So recently I've been on this TEDx application journey.
Yes.
And because you're a friend of mine and I have access to you, I'm like, Katie,
VIP list.
I need to hire you for an hour. We gotta drill down, because here's the thing. Even and especially as a coach, I have to have coaches.
Yep.
Have to have coaches. I mean, if I were a hairstylist and I were trying to dye my hair, I would not be like tinfoiling the back of my head myself. I would have one of my coworkers do that, right? And it's kind of like that in the world that we're in. So any coach that's worth their salt who doesn't have their own coach in some form or capacity, run the other direction.
Yeah, if you're helping without getting helped, it's you're pouring out a lot without getting a lot back in. And it also gives off that feeling of, I know everything, so I don't need any more help. And that's just such a boring way to work with people.
2 thumbs down to that. Hard
pass. Agreed.
Yeah. So what's so exciting to me, I mean, I want to talk a little bit more about that. About what you and I did. So I had a specific goal in mind. I wanted to come up with being able to tell the story of my talk in 5 words. Yeah. And I wanted it to be not flat.
So an exciting 5 words, or compelling 5 words as well. Not just a little bit, but something interesting.
Yeah, a compelling 5 words. And so you helped me do that. You helped me take it from this idea of throwing lots of things out there to really honing in on what I was trying to say without putting words in my mouth. You helped me figure it out.
That's awesome.
You're an alchemist.
I'm an alchemist?
You're an alchemist.
Thank you. That is one of my favorite books and favorite theories. So thank you. That's very cool.
And one other little follow-up to that, which I don't know if anything will come of this, but it's something that I think is a testament to your work, is that I have a friend who had a story recently put into the Wall Street Journal. And she said, hey, Alisha, I'm friends with the person who helped me get into the Wall Street Journal, and she's always looking for stories to pitch to her editor. And she presented my story and they were like, oh yeah, I'll take that to the editor and see what he thinks. So it was, those 5 words were good enough to at least take it to the next step. Who knows what will happen with this, but I mean, that alone felt really encouraging to me, whether or not I get a TEDx talk. And so I think that I'm really trying to put a pin in this point of, it's important to hire coaches.
Agreed.
It is really important to hire coaches. And so when I finally land this damn TEDx talk, I will be, I'm sure, hiring you to help me craft and wordsmith along the way. So that leads us to your new rebranding effort.
Yes. Yeah, it's a big change moment. It was before COVID when I was talking to my really good friend who's been my branding guy since undergrad. honestly. He helped me with my student body president campaign, and I've gone to him for branding ever since. My first company I started was Creative Machine Consulting, and the idea was founded in a couple thoughts. The first is that you're a creative machine, I'm a creative machine. Let's do this together. And second, in one of my favorite fun facts, which is that the word, when speaking of alchemy, the word abracadabra, like magic, translated means I create as I speak, which is to say that we create things as we say them. And that's my entire thing is communication. What I wanted as I started to get to know this thing that I do better, as it introduced itself to me, was to get a little bit more specific, but still open, so that it was a little bit more obvious up front what I do. So new rebrand is Communication X. And when it comes to Communication X, the idea is that you're the variable in a sea of variables that happens with presentations, because presenting, speaking, communicating, it's the Wild West, because we never know what the receiver is going to do, how the message will come out. Did I say the right thing or the wrong thing? Did I have enough water? Is my audience listening? Who's to say? So it's full of variables. And then the other idea is that it's X could stand for buy as well. If you've seen a lot of campaigns that come together, it's like target X someone's name. So it's like Communication X on its own, you're the variable, but also communication by Katie, communication by Alisha. It's your style. There isn't one perfect one. There's just your way of doing it. So that is what Communication X is representing right now. It's been a fun evolution to get that thing down.
And what are all of the different ways that people work with you these days?
These days, these COVID unprecedented times that we've gotten weirdly comfortable with. These days, it's online presentations, facilitating group discussions online, and also a lot of interview coaching. I did a big string of about 100 or more students from Duke University who were all upper level, incredible scholars. And I was helping them with their interviews. And so they're growing up for, like the Truman Scholarship or like these big management consulting firms. And I helped them with their interviews. And what you're hearing is that all of these rivers are going back to the ocean of communication. How I work with my team, how I present myself, how I tell my own story in an interview. All of that comes back to the same kind of ingredients. So that's what I've been working on lately.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can tell this story or not, but when you were working with some of the women, you had some interesting things come up.
With women with where?
With women, like these scholars, these PhD students. Can you tell that story?
They were, some of them, they were undergrad, they were masters, I think some were above as well. The interesting things that I saw, and to know specific, was that they were so stacked with accolades and grades, and they had come from these incredible high school experiences. And then they get to a really acclaimed university. And what happens is that feeling of, I have achieved so much, I have this shining star next to my name. Now everyone has the same kind of star. And so this weird feeling seeps in of, am I not good enough? Like, are people going to find out? And they were going through these rigorous classes. Essentially what was happening was that even though they had all these skills and these experiences, they were still nervous they weren't good enough. And it was very interesting to see, because through anyone else's lens, it's like, obviously you're amazing. It's very clear that you're good at what you're doing. But there was this fear of, is it enough? Am I good enough? Am I going to stand out enough? And so that was some of the big stuff that would happen, is that they would have all this stuff, but then be worried it wasn't enough to take them where they wanted to go. And it's competitive. I don't know if I could be a Gen Z applying for my first job right now. I don't know if I could hang.
Wow.
It's really hard out there. So they're very impressive, then they're afraid it's not enough, and their confidence is not where you would think it would be, aligned with how much they've done. And so one of the great joys of my work is talking to young women and telling them, you have the goods, you're amazing. Let's tell your story so that you feel comfortable and confident saying it.
Yeah. I mean, how did you help them? How did you help them with that feeling of him? I guess, is that an imposter complex, do you think? Is that or is that an unworthiness?
Yeah, I want to come back to imposter syndrome, because the more I hear the word imposter syndrome, the more I think it's not real.
And I mean complex, not syndrome. Yeah. I need to change.
Yeah, me too. Good work. Words matter.
I do.
So when it comes to imposter complex, it's like, do you actually think you're an imposter, or is sometimes the system that we all live and operate in convincing you that even though you've done enough, it's not enough? Like, do you actually think you're an imposter? Because I mean, if you really look at the root of you, you know there's something there. So I have qualms with imposter theories. What I think was happening was that they had gotten used to knowing the exact target they needed to hit. If I study this way, if I do this well in my paper, if I do this presentation, I'll get an A in this class, that's success. And that's what we work through in school. Even, if I do all these, if I play all these instruments, if I'm in these groups, then I'll get into this school. We know how to do it. Then suddenly the world opens up and you're like 21, 22. And the world's like, you can be whatever you want, but you have to be the best, and you have to stand out, and you have to be yourself. And you have to be interesting, but not overwhelming. And you have to be very confident, but deeply humble. And it's a moving target.
Yeah, like no pressure, zero pressure.
And you're like, your frontal lobe isn't even formed yet. And they're like, be the best version of yourself. And you're like, who am I? So it's a little identity crisis, I would say. There's no more target. There's no more like, if I just do this combination of things, I'll succeed. It's now open. And it's up to someone else also. So I think it's that kind of weighs on them. And so I don't know if they think they're truly not good enough so much as they don't know the rule book anymore because it's gone.
There is no rule book anymore.
There's no rule book. Technically there never was, but it felt like there was one because you got the syllabus and you could do it and then you would get the grade. But now it's like you're graduating, scoot on out, go figure out your future, and it better be a good one. You better be impressive, and you better live up to this college education that you have. And like, it's also impossible. I think that's what they're coming up against.
Katie, okay, so through my lens right now, everything is through the lens of failure is a sacred right.
Yes, listen to 5 words. It sounds so good. And I've thought it to myself when I failed out in the real world.
Oh.
Yeah, it helps.
I'm so glad to hear that. But I'm wondering, like, what role does failure play, do you feel like, in public presentation?
Oh, wow. Oh, I just got chills because I love that question. What role does it play? A commanding one, a lead role. Failure is the captain of the team of presentations. I think. I know, this is my lens. I'm so fun at parties. So much fun. A real optimist.
You are. I know.
When we think about presentations, it's baked in. One thing I come back to a lot is I was leading a workshop for, I think, Synergy on presentation skills in the workplace. And this gentleman in the audience raises his hand and kind of cuts me off. And that's part of why I remember it. And he says, hey, how do you get a 100% with communication?
What? Is that the goal?
And so first of all, is that the right question? No, it's super boring. Who cares? Second, I was just like, I'm so delighted to tell you that doesn't exist. Like you can't hit perfect, because if I say something that I think is the best thing I've ever said, but you think it's the dumbest thing you've ever heard, then it doesn't really matter. You average the two together and it's kind of a 50%. If I say something that I think is really horribly dumb, but you loved it and you can use it, is that success? Because I feel ridiculous, but you loved it. So now it's, again, there is no 100. So I think that I put failure at such a, in such a cushy seat, because I want people that I work with to know that failure is going to happen. And it's not really interesting to me if you can do a presentation perfectly, because one of the things I researched is that we as humans connect better with other humans than we do with people who perform perfection. You've seen speakers and they hit all the right notes and they do all like the right gestures and they pause and they do the right lead-ins. And there's something in the back of your head that's like, ew.
Yeah, a person is coming to mind in my head right now. Like I like there's an actual human.
You have like a vision? Yeah, me too. It's the car salesperson, it's the snake oil salesperson, it's that feeling of like it feels inauthentic. And so perfection doesn't attract us the way we think it does. But we as speakers think we need to be perfect to be successful. So if we can get that out of the way, if we let failure come in, then we know that if we stutter, if we trip, if we drop our pen, who cares? You're a human being. Keep it moving. Just hold it lightly. That's the idea, is to hold failure, not with a death grip of I can't do this, but just really lightly, as though you're just crossing the street together. It's not meant to be something that deters you, but that connects you. Because if I let myself mess up as I'm speaking to you, then you're allowed to mess up when you use the tools I'm giving you. And we're still gonna, meet ourselves with Rumi in the field outside of what's right and wrong. So everything's gonna work out. And if I mess up, if my breath is weird, if my hands are in my pockets, it doesn't matter if I say something that you can use. That's the end goal, is how can I be helpful to the people listening to me? Not how can I do this perfectly and without failure. Nailing it is just helping people. Everything else is just, it's fine.
We're just trying to cross the bridge together.
We're just trying to cross the bridge together. This is not about me showing you how good I am at this thing. No one cares.
Okay, so how do we prepare for failure so that it doesn't stop us, but so that it helps us continue to connect?
My tea ceremony with failure, if you will. Oh gosh. One time, the phrase I say a lot is awareness is the first step. But one time I accidentally said acceptance is the first step. And I really liked that. Acceptance is the first step. So we accept it, much like a traffic jam. This is
after we throw our tantrum.
Whoa, throw the tantrum. Yeah. So some of the tactical ways that the tangible ways I prepare for failure. The first, I've talked to you about this, is a pre-mortem. And what a bummer. Pre-mortem is you imagine yourself a couple days beforehand completely bombing the presentation. It's this big presentation. You sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and you think, okay, let's imagine I completely failed. What did I do that failed? And it's anything from, I got the Zoom link wrong. I showed up late. My slides didn't work. I forgot that one really important point that I needed. I forgot to ask for questions. People were bored. The fire alarm went off. Anything. It's anything that could go wrong. And what it allows your brain to do is two things. First is it lets your anxiety play its part, because your anxiety is a survival skill. Your anxiety wants you to do well. And the way that it tries to help you is by saying, let's scan for everything that could maybe kill us. So you let your anxiety do its job. And then the second is it allows you to prevent some of it. So if you're nervous about your slides, you're going to go back through them. If you're nervous, you're going to forget, you make a note card with that one point. So you get to support yourself by diving into it. So you meet failure where it is, like a friend, and just say, okay, what do you have to tell me? Get it all out, and now you can go in. The second, and this is probably one of the things that changed my entire communication theory, especially presentations. A lot of the things that we think make us bad speakers are actually just our fight or flight system trying to help us. The things like, things like talking too fast, dry mouth, forgetting stuff, heart rate, all of that is just your, I totally forgot the words, but it's your brain trying to help you, because the fear of public speaking is rooted in a couple things. The first is a fear of loss of identity. And the second is loss of everything else that matters to me. So
a disconnection from love.
Yes. Wait, what do you mean by love?
Like, if I get this wrong, nobody's going to love me anymore.
And I'm going to get kicked out of the pack.
Yeah.
I'm going to be on my own, and I'm going to look like an idiot in front of people, the worst. And I know myself to not be an idiot. So my identity feels like it's up for grabs in discussion. Yeah, no one's going to love me anymore if I do this wrong. Which has never once have I sat in an audience and been like, let's decide if I love them. Let's decide, perform for me. Much like an American Idol judge, I'll decide if you made it through or not. No one does that, but we're all so nervous for doing it. It's not up for discussion. What's up for discussion is, can I use something from the stories you tell and the facts you share? Can I do something to better my life or the life of those that matter to me with what you tell me? So all that stuff, that the second part of failure is knowing that in the first 1 to 1.5 minutes, your public speaking anxiety peaks and then it evens out. So if you can make your introduction something that makes you feel comfortable and confident in yourself, like an anecdote you love, a story that matters to you, a piece of information you find useful. If you can add that in your intro, you can feel a little safer. You can get through that peak and just ride it out. But knowing that all that stuff that we think makes us bad isn't real. It's just your body trying to help. So help your body. You're not failing. You're not bad at this. And then second, just get all the failure fears out first and go into it with all you got. It's just about helping people.
And if we are just helping people, what's really going to go wrong?
What's going to go wrong? One of the Nancy Duarte, Duarte of she's a famous public speaking coach and speaker. She has a really great TED Talk, and she explains that often, I don't know if this is going to matter to you. Are you a Star Wars person? I don't think you are. No, you're not.
I'm not, but keep going.
Okay.
I'm sure there are Star Wars people listening.
Conversationally, someone here is. Okay. For my Star Wars fans, she makes this great metaphor, which is that many times speakers think they are Luke Skywalker and they need to save the day. When in fact, you are Yoda when you're speaking, and the entire audience is actually the Jedi that you need to teach.
I always wanted to be Yoda.
Yeah, well, that's what you are when you speak.
Well, really, no, I want to be an Ewok, but that's...
Yeah, well, who doesn't? So yeah, you're there as either an Ewok or as a Yoda. You're there as a helper. And so it doesn't really matter if you speak in weird sentences. If your Jedi can use it, then that's a success. So it's not about you being the best you've ever been. It's about how can I make these people the best they've ever been. So then one of the great paradoxes of public speaking is that you're speaking, but it's not about you. And that allows
never about us.
Never about us. Our life is not our own. We're all in communion. So it's how can you be helpful? That's the goal. Make it not about you, and see your anxiety just fisher away. Now my ego plays no real part. It doesn't matter if I'm funny unless that helps the message go down. It doesn't matter if I'm cool.
It's funny how everything comes back to transcending that damn ego.
Honestly, yeah. And I think sometimes, one of the things I love about public speaking is you have to meet all the parts of yourself. It's a completely somatic experience. So mind, body, spirit, all that, because you're all the way up there. It's all you up there.
Say more about that. In public speaking, you have to meet all of the parts of yourself.
What I mean is you have to meet yourself at your most anxious. You have to meet yourself as mentally, because you have the words up here. You have to say them. So you're, using your body that way. All your emotions are tied up into it. I'm doing a lot of talk about how it's not about you, but every time I have to tell myself, I have to look in the mirror and be like, listen, Marshall, it's not about you. This is a constant, which is part of the failure, right? The failure is remembering that I still get sucked into the siren song of thinking it's about me. I have to do it every time. So you have to meet your ego. You have to meet your desire to serve others. How do you do under pressure? It's every version of yourself kaleidoscopically comes together in this effort to share a message that means enough to you to tell an entire group of people. So it's all the versions of you. You at your best, you at your worst, coming together.
It's so funny that you should say that, because today I was interviewed on a podcast way back in February. I mean, who can even remember February at this point? But it got released today, and she asked me the question, what keeps you doing what you do? And in my head, I'm already answering the question as I'm listening back to this. And I'm like, your clients, Alisha, that's what keeps you doing what you're doing. And that is not how I answered it. And it was like listening to a train wreck. And I was like, oh God, Alisha.
And what did you learn from that?
Be a little more present to what you're saying and answer it a little bit more honestly, because it is about my clients.
Yeah. And that, and something when that mic gets in front of you, when that interviewer asks you that question, you're like, let me answer this differently. The truth. The truth lives inside you.
I'm like, that's down. The true self answer is in there. Why did it not come out of my mouth?
Which is why I say failure is baked into this thing, because sometimes you hit a wrong note, you don't even know until later. I remember listening to our podcast episode a couple of years ago, and you're like, what's your greatest regret? And I had some nonsense answer about how I didn't go as Chewbacca for Halloween. My friends went as Star Wars, go figure. And I was like, that's not even, I just was so scared to be like, here's what I'm actually regretful of, that I was just like, let me shield it. I was like, oh, one time I made a bad Halloween call. I was like, horrible regrets. Regret is like a compass of my life. I have daily regrets I could have pulled upon. But no, I was just like, here's a cool answer.
Yeah. But here's the thing, right? If I view that answer on that podcast certainly as failure, and I'll get another chance to do it again.
And you'll do it better because you had this moment of awareness, which is why I think failure is so helpful, because it leads us to awareness, which is the real goal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't know it sometimes until you do it.
Practice. The
whole thing is practice. Yeah, for sure.
I was thinking back on that idea. So when I was younger, I loved ballet, and there was maybe a 3 or 4 year period of time where my parents had enough money to send me to get ballet lessons, and I loved it. And I sucked the first couple years, right? Like I was just horrible. And it was like the last year that I got to do it, they're like, next year you're good enough to go on point now. And then that's when my parents pulled me out, and I was like, what? It's like that type of thing. However, I as an adult, I'm now recalling what that ballet teacher, Karen was her name, what Karen taught us. And Karen would say, it's not practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And I think about that now. And I really loved Karen.
Yeah.
She, for a lot of reasons. However, I would never say that to anyone.
Okay, why not?
Okay, first of all, what we've already stated, there's no such thing as perfect.
Doesn't exist.
And you have to practice it imperfectly, get feedback on that imperfect practice.
Yeah.
Try again and again and again and again.
Yep.
And that's what makes perfect. Or whatever, not even perfect. I need a different word. That is what makes beautiful.
Yeah, there we go. I like that. That's where the beauty comes in. In the, the two things that come to mind. The first is that the tangible tip is that I tell my clients when they're going for interviews to practice the way they would play. So if they were students and they're going for a scholarship interview, I said, I need you to find a professor that you trust, but you're a little scared of. And they need to be important to you, but they're going to be nice to you, but you need to want to impress them. Because the practice ideal is that it's high pressure, low stakes. Feel the pressure of this thing, because that's what's going to happen in an interview. If I just interview with my roommate, that's a completely different experience than, Dr. So-and-so. So I say, find someone who feels like the interview. The second is this nonsense thing I used to peddle in big presentations. I think I talked about it in like a keynote, was that I used to really condescend the word strive. Because I like Googled the word, and I found out that strive came from the French word like a strife, and it means pain in a losing battle. And so there's nothing in the word strive that says you're going to succeed. And there's so many things that we see, corporate and otherwise, they're like, we strive to deliver the best to our customers. We strive to be our best, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you shouldn't strive. You should just do. But what that means is, which is like, great, thanks, coach. Like, okay. What it means.
I love that though, Katie.
I know it really calls upon the athlete in me. But what it can also do is, if you have some of those perfectionist performer tendencies that a lot of us do, that if you feel like you can't hit it perfectly, maybe you won't do it at all. And so what striving does is, I think, allows some grace, just like you're saying, into the process. That it's not about practicing perfectly, it's about doing it wrong a bunch, getting some feedback, and then going back at it. And similarly with striving, which I used to just tear apart, if you can strive and you can reach, what can you learn in the reaching so that eventually you'll get there? Right? I just learning from what I said incorrectly in the past. Yeah, why not strive? Is that so bad? Am I too good to strive? No, there's plenty I strive for.
I don't know. I'm starting to take issue with words like hard work and strive.
How so?
Okay. It is not that I don't believe in hard work.
Yeah.
Right. But I have tied my worth, and I see this with clients too. So this is something that like comes up with all of my clients, especially when you're coming from a white middle class or lower middle class household, like mine, where indirectly I believed that my worth was completely tied to how hard I could work.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to really see how the ripple effects of that, and I detest the word toxic, but I'm going to use it in this situation, were it was poisonous. Like that's a really poisonous thought process. That's a capitalistic, patriarchal, like I'm worthy and whole as I am.
Yeah.
Period.
I was on my deck the other morning having a late breakfast, And my neighbor came out, she was on her way to work. And I was just like, hey, so have you had a productive morning? And as soon as I said it, I was like, I don't care. I don't care. That's not my big question in life. But, she answered and I was just like, wait, actually, I just apologized. I was like, that was so weird. That's not what I meant. Like, are you having a really good morning? I know you're going to work. Like, are you good? But there's something in our words. And that's what I think is so fascinating about that idea that we create as we speak. The way we define these things and say it out loud makes it creates the container to have a productive morning. I honestly could care less. Like, did you read something beautiful? Did you find some art? Did you have an enjoyable morning? What did you fall in love with yourself more? Like, those are the actual things I care about. But instead I went with just the baseline, like deeply entrenched question of like, were you productive? And mostly, here's the thing, because communication is reflexive. So when I say something, sometimes it's just a reflex. It's also reflective. So when I say something to you, I kind of just want you to ask me about it. Mm-hmm. What I realized as I unpacked was that I was nervous that she saw me just lounging on my deck, because God forbid, and it was like 11:30, and I needed to prove that I had earned sitting on this deck outside.
Right.
So I needed to let her know I had been productive. And she was like, have you? And I was like, I was really productive. And that's when suddenly I was just like, I don't care. Are you good?
And what's interesting to me is how come we're not taught things to ask things like, what did you learn in the stillness this morning?
Yeah. What beautiful thing came to mind for you?
Yeah. And here's the interesting thing about hard work. And I don't want to knock hard work, because there's a time and a place, and
Really?
sometimes you got to buckle up and do it. But what I have found is that the successes that have come to me that I'm most proud of came when I allowed stillness. Yeah. It came when I allowed rest. And then I was able to approach the problem from a better place, or a more creative place, or a healthier place. And if we're so busy working hard and we're never able to give ourselves space and rest and comfort, then we never get to answer the deeper questions.
Agreed.
In life or work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you're such a solid gardener. There's this thought too, that if I plant something and I keep checking it every day, it can't be the thing it's supposed to. If I keep like poking at it and like pulling it out, and it can't grow. But if you just leave it.
It's so funny you bring that up, Katie. So there's this card that there's two thoughts that I'm having. There's this card that we in Raw, which is our morning writing group, right? There's this card that keeps coming up. It's like one of those stalker cards that like we can't get rid of it, but it has this line that if you planted seeds yesterday, you wouldn't dig them up today to see if they were growing.
Fun. Yeah.
And so that's the first thought. That card is always coming up. It's like, slow your roll, Alisha, slow your roll. And then the next thing is that my grandmother gave me peonies last year. I love peonies. Yeah. They're up there for me with tulips and roses. I mean, like.
What's your order? Are they all together? Is it like rose, tulip, peony, or is it?
Yeah, I love them all. I don't.
Fair enough.
Yeah, there's no hierarchy there, although I really love tulips, but peonies are, I don't know, see, no hierarchy.
Yeah, we're the same. Got it. Nail it. Keep going.
Although I do prefer pink peonies over white peonies. But I planted last fall these peonies, like they're not like a bulb, they're like a root. And they're a perennial, so they'll come up every year. And you know, they've been coming up, and they went from that tight little bud to the bigger bud, and then the bud's been opening. And so it's like,
it's so exciting. Yeah.
It's really exciting, but here's what I keep finding that I'm doing. So I go out there every day to look at them. Am I pretty? Uh-huh. And I'm like, why aren't you opening faster? Like, it's not pretty just the way it is.
I know. And then because time's happening all at once, at some point you go out there and they're done for the season. So then you're also like, why didn't I enjoy them when they were the small schmees that they were? I waited and now isn't that incredible? We're always being humans.
I know that happened with my irises. Although I did really enjoy them every day, but now all of a sudden they're already gone. And I'm like, how did that happen so fast?
I don't know. It's already May in this year of nothing and everything. Interesting. Yeah, with flowers especially, which are such stark reminders of the beauty of the world. It's like, can you do this a little bit better? Could you just, I do that too. I have a bunch of plants in my deck where I'm like, can you perform? And the plant's like, for who? Which is, I think, the question that a lot of us could ask. Who am I performing for?
That's the question that Virgo asks?
No, that I think a plant could ask. A Virgo? No, I don't know.
Oh.
No idea. Cancer, Capricorn over here. I have no idea what to do with a Virgo. Other than like launch a company or a project list. No, I think that's what plants are asking us is, who should I perform for? And I think that's what we could ask ourselves as well, is in those moments when we're like, I need to perform. For who? Because I don't require anyone else in my life to perform for me in the way that I think I need to perform for them. And that's an interesting thing to keep in mind, I think, both as a communicator and as a friend and as like a partner and a daughter and a sister. I'm never like, perform better, but I do that to myself.
That's deep, Katie.
Yeah, peonies will do that too.
Yeah, I agree. Peonies will do that for you. Okay, so last year,
yes,
in the pandemic, you graduated with your master's in communication, right?
In training and development with a focus on public speaking. Yes.
Okay, I've got a really big, broad question for you.
Let's do this.
And I want you to take this any direction. What was the most favorite thing you learned while getting your master's?
My most favorite thing I learned while getting my master's. Oh, goodness. I'm sure there's several. I think one was the affirmation that I'm not a bad student, but that adult learners need to be educated differently than child learners. And that was in my adult education class, one of my first ones. And what the class covered was how to set up a room, how to bring people into a training. Things like adult learners need to be given tangible things they can actually use. That theoreticals don't really mean a lot for adult learners. That you need to get them to ask questions, you need to get them to talk to each other. All these things I was hungry for in trainings, which probably is what led me to be a trainer, facilitator, coach. I just didn't always feel like they were happening. These long 5-hour trainings where I just have to listen to someone else, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. No one
actually, down the toilet.
Yeah, honestly, it's so boring. No one likes it. No one likes it. First of all, 5-hour training, your brain taps out at about an hour and a half. So I don't know why we keep doing that to each other. Second, to hear the same voice over and over for that long, I'm somewhere else. This is useless.
Yep.
Stop doing useless trainings. But what I learned is that it's not, and I thought there was something wrong with me. And, you know, the ego again is like, I'm the worst, I'm the best, I'm the worst. And so I just thought I was bad at it, but actually it's just not the way we prefer to learn. And as soon as I learned that, what was exciting was to be a student who was also an instructor of adults. So each time I learned a little bit more, I could go apply it to the people that I served, and I could learn from them and go apply it over here. So that was probably some of my favorite stuff that I learned. It's that, and there was this one article in the Harvard Business Review. A woman researched and found this authenticity principle. So the study was 3 groups. One group were catering to their audience, one group was neutral, and one were authentic. And the catering group is trying to do what they think the other person wants. Neutral, authentic is whatever I feel, however I want to be. And what the research found was that it was those that were authentic that did the best, and that the catering did the worst. Because we don't really want to be catered to. It feels bad. It feels weird.
So what are your like top 3 tips for being authentic in communication?
I think the first tip is knowing that being authentic doesn't mean you have to start out with, hey, I'm puking every 30 seconds. I feel really sick today. Like that doesn't have to be what authenticity is. And I I had that miscommunicated once in a training where someone was like, well, we can't always be authentic because sometimes you're in a bad mood. And I was like, we're talking about different things. Similar to
Seth Godin's last book.
Is that what he talked about in it?
Yeah, he talks about how you don't want your doctor to be authentic. I'm like,
yeah.
Dude, you're just trying to sell books. Stop talking.
So that's the first one, is that it's the Brene Brown principle, which is that vulnerability is not, hi, I'm Katie, here's the darkest thing that's ever happened to me. It's a relationship building. And that's what authenticity is. It's like, hey, I've got some questions about that. Hey, I don't feel totally comfortable with this. Let's talk it through. That's more authentic than like, in second grade, that like no one actually wants that from you in the start. That's know what authenticity is. Second is something I just learned from a fellow coach, and which is that when it comes to being authentic, not everything has to be a hot take.
What does that mean?
Meaning there's something in us that thinks that if we say something, it has to be like the biggest retweetable thing of all time. And it has to be the most interesting thing anyone's ever heard. What we know for sure is that all the centuries old theologies and spiritual guides and communicators, rhetoric is really basic. If we think about it in communication terms, it's messenger, receiver. Like that's communication, and that's what rhetoric is. It's really quite simple. But there's something lately where it feels like to get the most attention, I have to say like the coolest thing you've ever heard, and it's got to be a hot take. And it's almost like the devil's advocate thing. It's just like you were referencing with that book. It's like, you're just trying to sell books. Like that's not real. The opposite of what we're used to doesn't mean it's a hot take or worthy of my time. So being authentic means you don't have to always be interesting every time. And then I think the third is that to be authentic, one of the key ways to open the door is to appreciate the authenticity in someone else. And that if I can acknowledge what you're doing really well authentically, then I will feel safer to be authentic as well, and we'll both feel more open to it, rather than let me be the most myself I can be and forget you, because we're all in connection with each other. So that's what I would say. Know what it is. Know that it doesn't have to be interesting or amazing every single time. And third, that you're in connection with someone. So celebrate their authenticity as well.
Be sure to throw the ball.
Throw the ball and ask questions. I think that's one of the most authentic things you can do. It's like, if you and I, if you came to me and said, I want to work on this presentation, and I just dove in and I didn't even ask you, what's your comfort with public speaking? How far are you along in the outline to know your topic, to know your audience? Maybe you know a lot more than I'm giving you credit for. And I'm authentically just taking it and running, but you're like, I guess I don't matter here. I guess, authenticity is about the connection. So yeah, ask questions would be a fourth.
Okay. Yeah. What else do you want us to know, Katie? Sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit. I think lately what I want people to know, if you're communicating virtually, and I know you do this, so I'm curious your perspective as well. When it comes to the Zoom calls and the big virtual meetings, one of the best tips that I've heard is that to have good Zoom calls, do less of them. And I think that's the most interesting thing I've heard on the entire plane, because a lot of people are asking me to come on now with their teams and figure out how to work out these meetings, and we can. But if you're doing meetings from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. straight, I can't make that more interesting for you.
Right.
It's exhausting. How do I engage my people? Let them have time to eat. Let them get away from their computers. Let them go hang out with their kids or their partner who's at home right now and enjoy the weird gift that we have of this time. Do less of it rather than do a lot more better. That's what I think. Like, how are your video calls?
My Zoom world is so different from corporate Zoom. I'm like, come to Alisha land. Let's light a candle and sage and go ahead and eat, or turn your video off, or just dial in. Do what my Zoom world is so different.
I think even telling people that they can turn their computer or their camera off is so freeing, because now it's a choice. There's one of the big debates is, how do I get people to put their cameras on because I need them to be engaged? It's like, maybe they don't want to. And what if that were okay?
Yeah.
And just by you saying it's a choice and you can turn it off, it immediately frees something in my mind. And I think that's one of my other favorite principles of communication is this element of free will. I can't control you. I can't make you do something. This is all options. So if I ask you questions and get your interests and we build this thing together, it's a lot more likely that it will matter and be helpful to you than if I just say, you'll do it like this or else. I hate that. No one likes that.
Yeah, you know, with these interviews that I've been doing on failure, I have this goal to interview 50 women on, or 50 people. In this case, it doesn't have to be women. I'm just so used to working only with women. But I've interviewed men and they have really cool perspectives. And so what I have, when I send the Zoom link over, I make it a point to say, please feel free to call in if you want to. I only want to do it via Zoom so that I can easily record. But to me, it's how are you going to be most comfortable? You don't need to be on video to make this happen. And I think that's one of the weirdest things about this time is that we are seeing ourselves for how many hours a day. Like that's the part I dislike the most. Like, I don't want to see me for that many hours of the day.
I also don't want to grow so obsessed with how I look when I talk that I forget how to do it. Like, so that's what my face looks like when I say that. Maybe I should just the constant tweaking. We all do it enough to ourselves that, for a while, I constantly kept things on gallery, which is where I see both people. But I just realized too late, maybe, or just on time, that if I do that, it's too easy for me to like look at myself like I'm Jim from The Office looking into the camera, like making a joke with myself. Like, so weird. And to that end, I think the other thing I want people to remember or keep in mind is like how weird we all are now after a year, mostly inside with a pandemic or speaking through masks. We're all a little weird right now. And I've got some people hiring me so they can like figure out their weirdness and communicate with people again. And I think the first step to that is knowing that you're not the only one. It's not just you out there.
That is a real thing, isn't it?
Socially skittish. We forgot how to do things. It's okay. We're all figuring it out.
So it's not just us weird introverts that were already really socially awkward and skittish.
Oh, I have such a soft spot for introverts. No, it's not just you all. We're all a little confused about how to do things now. And the other thing thinking about fight or flight is that when you're in a pandemic for a year, your survival skills have been a bit on overdrive because you had to make it through a thing that you couldn't see. You had to fight a force that you couldn't address. You just knew it could happen at any time. And you didn't know how bad it could be. So survival skills were just like up to your eyebrows. And now we're hearing, some hope and some changes and, maybe we can start doing things that feel a little bit more normal. And which is exciting, but there's also a part of us that's like, okay, but do I just jump in the water or is it like toes in the water or should I like wait till everyone else goes in the water? Like we're all a little, no one's entirely sure what to do right now. And we're all just trying to do it as best as we can. And then if my best looks and feels threatening to your best, then we're all just a little bit more protective of our modes of operating. I need this now to make it through the day, things like that.
Just a little more compassion.
Just a little more compassion. Unfortunately for us impatient folks, a little bit more patience, and just knowing that if someone's weird, they're just doing their best. And they have been reading weird articles just like you have about what you think is true and going on. We're all just trying to, we all lost a lot. We all lost a lot and to varying degrees. Yeah. And so there's some mourning that we haven't been able to face because we've had to be, productive despite mass worldwide trauma. And it doesn't, so the wound's still there, but we're kind of just hobbling. We're like, okay, now let's go out for beers with our friends again. That's so weird.
Yeah. How does that happen, right?
For everyone differently. That's what I think.
Katie, last question.
Yes.
How do you live a life of abundance?
How do I live a life of abundance now? I remember this question from before. What's the truth? What's the true answer to that question? With a lot of patience and a willingness for feedback from people who matter to me and differently each day. I've been trying to get up and stay awake in the morning. And then today I like snoozed a little and I felt massive snooze guilt. And I was like, this snoozing isn't hurting anyone.
Nope.
And so I think today it was, sleeping in a little. Yesterday it was getting up early and getting a bunch of stuff done and then having an afternoon off. And then other days it's serving a bunch of clients or building something. So I think it changes with the day, but with the knowing that what good I can put in will flower at its own pace.
Katie, talking to you is always a pleasure. And I know that those listening have so many good nuggets and takeaways from this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Delightful as always, my friend.